If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Central to weight loss is the idea of caloric balance. To lose weight, you must be in a hypocaloric state. Calories in must be less than calories out. What role, however, does cardio play in losing weight? Many people say that cardio exercise is essential for weight loss. Others are saying that cardio is not the answer. Confused? Well, in this episode, we discuss the balanced approach to losing weight by focusing on the goals and the exercise continuum for aging well. I've seen a lot of purported cardiologists and bodybuilders suggesting that cardio is not the answer to weight loss. This can be a confusing topic, especially considering that for years we've been told to do more cardio for heart health and to lose weight. I think this might be a good topic for an episode of the Aging Well podcast.
Why is that the case? Why do people say that cardio is the number one way to lose weight?
I think it's largely because we've been taught that the only way to lose weight is to be in a caloric deficit. Calories in must be less than calories out.
Yeah, you've taught this.
And I still do, but it's more nuanced than just decreasing one's caloric intake and or increasing one's caloric expenditure.
There is macro balance and nutrient timing.
Those do indeed play a role, and we will circle back to those. I think it's important to consider how the calories are expended.
So who is right, the cardio group or the non-cardio group?
Perhaps neither.
Okay.
What I mean is that we shouldn't overemphasize cardio, nor should we eliminate it altogether.
So some cardio is beneficial.
Absolutely. We must take care of our heart and the cardiovascular system if we want to age well.
We want to maintain a relatively high VO2 max. And for our listeners, VO2 max is the measure of one's maximum oxygen uptake. How much oxygen can one utilize to do physical work? It is the measure of our cardiorespiratory fitness.
Correct.
So how does one improve VO2 max? Is it long, slow distance or low intensity, steady state aerobic exercise? Or is it high intensity interval training?
Personally, I think it's the continuum of exercise training, including strength training.
Strength training can improve one's VO2 max? Is that because a stronger person can do more work?
Yes, basic potentiation in a sense.
Better endurance, better work capacity. Better work capacity, better strength training stimulus.
Better strength, better endurance training stimulus.
So we want to do cardio, but how much?
That's the million-dollar question. Ultimately, it comes down to one's goals.
So for someone looking to be fit and to age well, how much cardio?
In my opinion, as little as necessary.
Well, that's a little vague.
As it should be. Everyone is different and has different needs and goals.
The principle of individuality.
Yes, the principle of individuality. What scenarios do we have for people wanting to age well?
Over fat and under muscled, lean and under muscled, over fat and adequately muscled, lean and adequately muscled.
Regarding body composition, yes, and anything in between.
And of course, there is fit and unfit.
Yes, so we are back to goals. Let's assume that everyone wants to add muscle mass, or at least maintain it.
Well, as they should. That leaves the goal for the body composition and the cardiorespiratory fitness.
So let's also assume that someone wanting to age well will also want to improve or maintain cardiorespiratory fitness.
ACSM, American Heart Association guidelines?
That is a start. What does the American College of Sports Medicine recommend?
Their general guidelines are perform moderate intensity aerobic activity for a minimum of 30 minutes, 5 times per week, or vigorous intensity aerobic activity for a minimum of 20 minutes, 3 times per week. Resistance exercise for the majority muscle groups, a minimum of 2 times per week. The goal for fat loss should be to increase overall activity. Exercise should be a minimum of 3 to 5 sessions per week, manipulating the variables to maximize the calorie expended with a goal of 1,000 to 2,000 kilocalories per week. ACSM recommends a frequency of 5 or more days per week to maximize caloric expenditure.
So for time efficiency, more vigorous is better. Remember, vigorous is relative. High intensity is relative to one's maximum capacity.
And maximum capacity is related to the amount of exercise that one can do safely.
Exactly. So let's be clear. To age well, you need to exercise safely. Don't initiate an exercise program without having clearance from your physician.
And if you have existing health problems, consult a qualified professional. So for cardiorespiratory endurance, do you recommend steady state exercise or high intensity interval training?
Because time is limited for most of us, I favor high intensity interval training. Asumi Tabata and colleagues demonstrated that short sequences of very high intensity cardiorespiratory exercise can improve VO2 max. Granted, their IE1 protocol was more intense than most people can do.
Which is why you usually preface Tabata training with air quotes.
Exactly. The Tabata, the IE1 protocol, is 8 cycles of 20 seconds of very high intensity cardio, followed by a 10-second recovery.
So 4 minutes of cardio?
With a brief warm-up and cool-down, we're talking really between 12 and 15 minutes of cardio to stimulate cardiorespiratory fitness.
That's great for cardiorespiratory fitness, but what about fat loss?
Well, there is some evidence that high-intensity interval training can provide for prolonged energy expenditure. But for fat loss, we're going to want to just move more.
Yeah, but moving more doesn't have to do with cardio.
No, physical activity is any movement beyond sitting on our butts all day. We can think of this as non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
Neat.
Neat as in cool or neat as an acronym?
Well, both. So why not just do more cardio exercise?
More isn't always better. Remember, the father of aerobics, Kenneth Cooper, once said, if you're running for more than 30 minutes, you are doing it for more than your health. We must consider recovery.
And if we are trying to add muscle mass, we need to allow for recovery from that.
We do. And we must consider the time we have available for training.
So non-exercise activities, thermogenesis, allow us to burn more calories without negatively affecting recovery from weight training and cardio?
Overall, yes. It also allows for more food calories for muscle recovery and growth while maintaining a hypocaloric state.
And we can lose fat by sparing muscle.
That is the goal.
So when we say do less cardio for aging well, we don't mean move less. We mean devote more time to weight training and less time to cardio-specific exercises.
And more time to simply moving.
So to lose body fat and improve the body composition by increasing muscle mass, we lift weights, do a few sessions of high-intensity interval training a week, and increase physical activity.
Find ways to increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Take the stairs, park the car further away than you normally do, walk rather than drive short distances, schedule walking meetings, etc. At the same time, moderately decrease your food intake, maintaining protein intake, and focusing on nutrient-dense carbs and healthy fats.
So why is there such a myth of performing more cardio-based exercises when the science clearly says, hey, resistance training is a better way to go?
I'm not sure that the science says that. We're only kind of getting around to where the science is beginning to finally say what it should be saying. I think that's maybe a little bit of my bias in reading the science, but I think kind of historically, as a field of exercise science, exercise physiology, we have focused much more on cardiovascular health. We went through that era of time when it was high carb, low fat diets, heart health. An exercise physiologist being trained in the 80s when I was basically preparing for a career in corporate fitness or cardiac rehabilitation, not for becoming a strength and conditioning coach per se, or personal training and all the kind of plethora of fields that we now have with exercise science. And so I think mistakenly, and not intentionally, but I think that was the general emphasis of exercise physiology back then, was heart health. And it was about doing more and more cardio, trying to get the heart healthy. And we neglected the importance of maintaining skeletal muscle. And I think we're finally realizing that without skeletal muscle, we can't perform. And if we can't perform, we can't do cardio. And our heart health is going to decline from that. And as well, we tend to overemphasize this idea of, in order to lose weight, you have to burn more calories. And the way to burn calories is doing cardio, where in reality, our goal should not necessarily be to lose weight. Our goal should be to lose body fat or fat weight. And we can lose fat weight better if we increase our muscle mass, or at least maintain muscle mass. Because remember, if we're doing a lot of cardio, it's not efficient for an endurance athlete to be carrying a lot of excess muscle. And so the body responds by putting more of that energy into the movement and the training that it's doing, rather than putting energy into building skeletal muscle. And so when we're doing a lot of cardio, we're burning a lot of fat because it's a lower relative intensity. And as fat, we burn fat, we tend to minimize muscle gain and our weight goes down. But for somebody who is not a really well-trained athlete that's going through these cycles of weight loss, they lose the fat and some muscle mass. And of course, invariably, we always kind of tend to gain it back. So we gain fat back. We don't gain the muscle back. We go back to doing more and more cardio. We burn the fat again, but we lose more muscle. And it becomes this vicious cycle of losing muscle mass, increasing sarcopenia, but not doing much to really sustainably lose the body fat.
So what do you think was the big push to focus primarily on just heart health? Do you think like people were having heart attacks back then? And couldn't that have been a factor of their own nutrition? Maybe taking in too much bacon fat or something to that effect?
I don't think that was really the reasons. I mean, I think you just saw people that had a greater interest in cardiovascular disease. And, that was perhaps beginning to rise a bit more because we were becoming less and less active. And, the obvious conclusion is that if we do more cardiovascular exercise, we're going to improve our cardiovascular health. And then we just kind of took it to an extreme. It was really in the late 70s, early 80s that, people started running marathons. It was we didn't have hundreds of thousands of people signing up for the Boston Marathon back in the, 70s. It wasn't until, you had Jim Fixx and some of these that really started to endorse more cardiorespiratory training. Remember, there was a period of time when women were discouraged from doing a lot of distance running and endurance work because they thought it was unhealthy for them. And so I think we were just kind of learning things, and we went, as we tend to, go into these pendulum swings where we do too much of one thing. And we may be moving toward a pendulum swing where now we are, and I think we might be in regards to bodybuilding and weightlifting, is that we are discouraging people from doing cardio and just focusing on lifting. The caloric deficit is being driven more by HIIT training with just one eye, not high intensity interval training, but more high intensity training, kettlebell workouts, even like Bulgarian bag workouts, taking that idea, that concept of Tabata with no air quotes and adding the air quotes to it and saying, okay, well, if it works for doing 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off for 8 cycles, well, if I do burpees for 20 seconds and then take a 10-second rest and then do another set of burpees and do that 8 times, I'm going to burn more body fat. And we do, but that's not necessarily improving cardiovascular health. And it's not necessarily improving muscle strength. So we really need that balance. We need to consider the exercise continuum. And so on the far left of the continuum, if we put cardio on the left and strength on the right, on the far left is really just physical activity, getting ourselves moving more. And we definitely need to be doing more of that. That's burning calories. As long as you are not sedentary, not sitting on your ass all day, you're burning some calories. Now, if you're eating more than you're really expending, your body fat's creeping up. But if we can eat moderately and eat well and do more physical activity, taking the stairs instead of the elevator or the escalator, always blows my mind when I go to a conference, even ACSM. This is the group that's supposed to be physically active, and there'll be like in the conference center, there'll be 2 escalators going up either side of a set of stairs that are in the center part. And nobody's on the stairs. Everybody's taking the escalators. I'm like, seriously, folks, you're exercise physiologists. You should be walking your ass up those stairs instead of taking the escalator. The escalator should be empty. We look at buildings, the way buildings are designed, good luck trying to find the stairs to walk up to the first floor. So everybody pushes the elevator button and rides up. No exercise, no activity other than the fact that you're standing. You're burning a few calories standing. It's better than sitting down, going up the elevator, but you're really not moving. You're not burning calories. So finding ways that we can increase that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and remembering too that NEAT, that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is at a low enough intensity. We're burning calories, so we're burning fat, but it's not really unnecessarily impeding on our recovery from our strength training and our more intense cardiovascular. So as we move to the right of that continuum, we start moving into moderate intensity interval training, high intensity interval training. That is where we're stimulating changes in the cardiovascular system to improve heart health. And then as we continue to move, we start moving into muscle endurance type of activities where we're not really going to build much muscle mass, but we're burning fat. We're not necessarily improving the cardiovascular system dramatically, but it's getting some exercise, getting some benefit from that. We're really just kind of focusing on more of the localized muscle endurance. And then we move further to the right toward more and more strength. And as we build strength, we get that hypertrophy area, and then strength. Strength's going to allow us to build more hypertrophy. More hypertrophy allows us to build more strength. More strength, more hypertrophy, more muscle endurance allows us to do more cardiorespiratory exercise. And we work that whole level of the continuum as effectively as possible. So we're using our time efficiently. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Right. Well, that's also a huge life lesson there is trying to stay as in the middle of that continuum as we can, but we can tiptoe into the right or we can tiptoe into the left in order to kind of balance things out.
I would disagree. I wouldn't say stay in the middle. I say move across that whole continuum.
Oh.
We want to be training in all of those areas. We want activity in all those areas. It's a matter of goal. What is our goal? And as we look at something like periodization, where we are, again, trying to potentiate the various areas of that continuum, there's going to be periods of time we're going to be a bit more maybe focused on, say, muscle hypertrophy. And then we move to muscle strength. We might ignore our cardiovascular health, muscle endurance a little bit more. If you're training for a powerlifting competition, you're not going to be doing much cardio. You want to be doing a minimal amount. And that's where I think Tabata's research is critical, because we can show that a couple days a week for 12 minutes, you can intensely stimulate the cardiorespiratory system and at least maintain. We talk a lot about like the minimum effective volume, maximum recoverable volumes, maintenance volumes, and those types of things. We don't always have to be at a maximum recoverable volume, training just all out in every area, because we can't do it. We don't have the time, we don't have the energy, we don't have the recoverability. But we can train more in those areas where we're trying to get the most gains, but still be training at the other end of the spectrum, or various areas across that spectrum, in order to maintain and still get some development within those areas. So it's kind of like Charles Francis has termed vertical integration. That as we move through that periodization, we're moving from kind of one area of focus to another. We don't completely eliminate that other area of focus. We just decrease it to kind of, again, to that maintenance level, and increase the other areas where we're going to be stimulating adaptation in those. And so it's kind of, you can almost think of your exercise training as looking a bit more like the bars on an equalizer on the stereo. And when we used to have stereos, nobody really uses stereos anymore, I guess, now that we just download all our music. But hopefully most of the listeners, especially, the age group of many of our listeners, we're all familiar with the equalizers, and hopefully you are a little bit, where the bars are jumping up and down as the music is playing. And so if you think of each of those bars being a component of that training continuum, at some point it's going to be jumping up, at other points it's going to be jumping down, while others are going up and down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think we were kind of saying the same thing. I was using the wrong analogy. I was saying sticking primarily in the middle, but I guess you're right. I was talking about covering the whole thing instead of just staying in one side and just hanging out there. Prime example is your testimony that you gave when you went to an ACSM conference and you saw all of these former exercise scientists that really, really promoted cardiovascular exercise. And then when they got up to get their awards, they were just kind of frail. And it kind of was a changing moment for you, where you were like, no, resistance training is key here. So
yeah, that story was a little bit different. It wasn't any getting awards or anything, but it was that group of senior fellows in the organization. So these are the people that have really were the ones kind of established the American College of Sports Medicine in its infancy. They were the people who really would have been kind of the premier researchers when I was getting into the field. So yeah, it was those people who were the ones promoting the cardio, and we're less emphasizing strength. And I think I've told the story before about when I first got out of my master's and I was working at a gym in Pittsburgh, and there's a promotion going on there in this company. I forget what the magazine was. I want to say it was like American Health was kind of the magazine, but they were doing a promotion at our health club, and there's a guy there working for them by the name of Dave Draper. And we got to talking, and it's like he introduced himself, and I said, "That name sounds so familiar. Should I know you?" And his response was, "Well, you're probably thinking of the Dave Draper that was the bodybuilder back in the '60s, pretty famous for being on the Beverly Hillbillies. So if you ever watch any, I don't know if you've ever watched the Beverly Hillbillies, great show, but there's a few episodes where this bodybuilder's on, and that's Dave Draper." He said, "I'm not that Dave Draper," but he kind of talks about what some of his background was, and he had been a strength and conditioning coach for, I think, the University of Michigan, the Michigan Panthers. I mean, he had a pretty good resume of experience in kind of the strength and conditioning side. And so we're talking, and he goes on, he says, "Yeah, these exercise physiologists are all a bunch of 160-pound weaklings, never lifted a weight in their life, telling you not to do full squats." And I'm feeling like, oh, great. He's going to ask me what my background is, and I got to say I'm an exercise physiologist. And we kind of got to that point. It's like, so what's your, what's your background? He said, well, I got my master's in exercise physiology. And he looks at me and pauses and says, you're not like the rest of them. And I use that story repeatedly. I mean, that's almost 40 years ago that this all happened. Not quite 40, probably about 35 years ago. But I continue to use that story because it's like, that was one of the best compliments I ever got as an exercise physiologist. To me at least, it's like, okay, I'm outside of the box. I'm looking at the science beyond the old school, and he was right. I mean, where am I at now? I'm ass to grass squats, pushing less cardio. I think everybody should be lifting weights. And so, yeah, that was kind of one of those moments. And then also that ACSM conference where just kind of seeing these fellows walking around and how frail they looked. And I'm not knocking them at all. I mean, it's, the majority of our older population are in that same kind of position where they are getting frail because they're not doing the right kinds of activities. And so it was just an aha moment for me looking at these people and saying, these were the people that were promoting cardio. These are the people that Dave Draper was talking about that say, you shouldn't, squat heavy and squat deep because you're going to hurt your knees and hurt your back and do all those types of things. And they promoted cardio. Well, what happens when they're promoting cardio? They're losing muscle mass in order to favor that endurance training. You lose muscle mass over time. You're not able to do as much activity. We lose that ability to do activity. Cardiovascular health is going to decline. And it's one of the reasons why we kind of see the plots. It's normal to see a decrease in VO2 max as you age, which is partly due to just kind of physiological changes as we age. But I don't think it has to be as pronounced as it is. I do very little cardio, and I think right now I'm probably not poor cardiovascular shape, but for myself, I feel like I'm not in my best cardiovascular shape. But I could do a VO2 max test, and I'm still going to be exceptional in my VO2, which to me, it doesn't make sense that that should be the case. And so that was an aha moment for me, looking at them and saying, okay, strength training is important because that's going to enable us to do more activity. If we want to maintain a healthy body composition, we can't do that by simply repeating these cycles of increased cardiovascular activity, decreasing caloric intake, and losing muscle mass. We have to eat a healthy amount of food so that we can maintain our muscle mass. We're training to maintain that muscle mass, and we do sufficient cardio in order to maintain our heart health. And in the process, we're burning as many calories as we can by simply moving more. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. He mentioned, and I wanted to lock onto it. You mentioned even how ACSM did not want people squatting below 90 degrees, right? And I remember getting my personal training certificate and going through that course, and it was even taught, like, try not to have your clients go below 90 degrees. And now it's almost as if there's a giant push. There's a lot of literature that's talking about the benefits of going below 90 degrees. And I mean, there's a famous YouTube channel called the Knees Over Toes Guys, and they always talk about that. I don't know if you guys are listening right now, but I would love to get you a part of this podcast. I think the Knees Over Toes Guys would be a great resource for those that are wanting to age well with their overall. I just think that would be wonderful.
Well, we'll see if they're listening. But I think, I mean, when we talk about the squat, and then we're kind of shifting from cardio into weight training. But when we look at the squat, there's no reason why people cannot go a full range of motion other than that they have either mobility issues or joint limitations that prohibit them from doing it safely. But if you, for example, I had a wrestler last week that just wasn't hitting his squat deep enough. I'm like, you can go deeper than on your squat. And I showed him, I said, kind of had him squat down into his primal squat. And I mean, he can go pretty deep into an ass to grass position. And so I said, that's how deep. You don't necessarily have to go all that way down, but pretty close to that with some weight. And you don't increase your weight until you can do that same range of motion with the the prescribed weight. And so he didn't change the weight on his squat. He got under the bar, squatted down to that position. Now he adjusted his foot position and his stance a little bit. And was consciously focusing on pushing his knees out. So he had really, really good technique. Same weight, he went all the way down. I said, and you can add weight to that. You're strong in that through that position. So a lot of it is just knowing, how do I hold my body in the right position to be able to get down to that depth? I see a lot of people that they attempt to be too vertical in their torso as they try to squat. And I think that's another one of those myths that we've promoted, that, kind of keep your back up so that you're not, putting strain on your lower back, where reality is you can lean pretty far forward and get into a deeper squat, and you're improving your mobility, you're improving your range of motion, you're improving back strength, you're improving hamstring strength, quadricep strength, gluteal strength, calf strength, all of that, doing that full range of motion squat. And so learn your proper mechanics and then maintain those as you're putting on weight. A number of years ago, I had a goal of trying to do a pistol squat, which for my body structure, that was a stupid goal, because it's like, I can maybe learn to get down to that, but I'm not going to build up any hypertrophy doing that. And I'm like, I want strength. I don't necessarily need this showy mobility, which is all it really kind of is. And I just realized, I'm better off just kind of focusing in on getting a better full range of motion squat. And so I dropped my weight. I mean, I checked my ego at the door. Unfortunately, I lift in my garage, so nobody's going to see me lifting anyhow. But I dropped the weight down. I think I went down to like about 135 pounds on the barbell. And I would squat all the way down, pause at the bottom, explode out from the bottom. And I slowly progressed from there. And then progressively that got more rapid. But I can still now squat much, much deeper at heavier weights. And I also found that when I'm going into that deeper squat, if my back is stiff in that morning and I kind of just warm up, get down into that deeper squat position, and then add some weight to it, my back actually feels a heck of a lot better after that lifting session rather than before. And so we can't limit ourselves and say, oh, I don't want to go too deep because it's going to be bad for my knees. And then you start having back problems because you're overloading the squat weight and not going deep enough. And so all that load and that stress gets put on the lower back. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So we discussed what ACSM recommends for how much an individual should do cardio-wise. What was it again, your recommendation for how much someone should be focusing primarily on cardio exercise?
Well, again, I'm not going to give a specific recommendation because I think everybody's goals and needs are going to be different. If I'm looking at like a cross-country runner, they don't need to be spending as much time lifting weights. They do need to build some strength. They need to do the basic lifts. And, it doesn't take much. It could be a few sets of a couple exercises that are more compound movements, like say focus on a push day, pull day. So have a day where you squat and you bench, and next day you're doing like hamstrings, and so maybe deadlifts or RDLs and a rowing exercise. Those 4 exercises are going to be sufficient to be able to maintain sufficient whole body strength and the necessary hypertrophy for them to perform as a cross-country runner. They don't want to put on a lot of muscle weight or extra weight. And obviously they're not going to be adding on a lot of fat because they're running so much. But their focus is going to be on running. And so they need to recover from the running, minimize the amount of weight training you're doing to allow for both recovery from the weight training and the cardio. And they don't have to worry about physical activity as much because they're running so much. But as they shift away from that, so they retire from collegiate running, say, and they're just kind of running for general health. If they want to run marathons, continue to run marathons, then the training is going to be a little bit different. It might only be 3 days of lifting per week and then 5 to 6 days of running on a weekly basis. I would also probably recommend, rather than running all those 5 or 6 days, cross train a little bit, do some either swimming or biking to just save the joints a bit more. But it's going to be a bit more of a continuum. If I'm a power lifter, I need to put more of my energy into lifting heavy, right? So I want to be able to recover from that. Doing a lot of cardio is going to diminish that capacity to recover from that. So in that case, it might be 6 days of lifting with 2 or 3 high intensity interval type workouts that are maybe 15 minutes long to stimulate the cardiovascular health.
So, what would you recommend for an individual who is limited in their mobility? Maybe it's someone who's in a wheelchair or a walker. What would you recommend that they do?
Well, again, it's going to be highly individual, so to give a general recommendation just based on that description, I mean, there's a pretty wide continuum of people in a wheelchair. I mean, I've seen people, there are bodybuilders, competitive bodybuilders that are in wheelchairs. They just, have no use of their legs. So they're primarily training all upper body. And then you have, a more frail elderly individual or somebody, a younger age that maybe has been injured in a car accident or swimming accident, whatever it might be. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But what do you have the capacity to do, and do that to your fullest? And so if you have use of the upper body, but not the lower body, work on exercises that can help increase your back, chest, shoulders, arms, core. You still want to work that core a little bit as best you can, and as you're able to. So you're just shifting those exercises. You're not going to have a leg day, but you can do other exercises. When it comes to cardio, that cardio can be done in, if you have a more athletic style wheelchair. We do have the ones, and people race in marathons with wheelchairs. You can use something like that. There are arm ergometers. There are bikes that you can pedal around your community that rather than pedaling with your legs, you're pedaling with your arms. That's going to give you all that same cardio. You can do a Tabata style cardio workout with just your arms. Maybe it's a rowing type of machine that, if you can get into a rowing machine, you're able to perform that movement. So do what you're able to do and do it in conjunction with your specific goals. And so your goals are going to be somewhere along that continuum. And if you're just trying to age well, like we are, just no performance goals in mind, then try and work as much across all of that continuum. So have, periods where you're working on more strength, you're working on muscle hypertrophy, but you're also working on your cardiovascular health.
You mentioned the little hand crank bike. I feel like, because that gave me a flashback, and maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly, but I feel like when I was in your class, you actually used a similar example when you were back in the day training someone and they had limited mobility in their legs, and you were doing something to get their heart rate up, and you used a hand crank and then brought it up above their head to get that heart. And I may, with the look on your face right now, I'm clearly remembering a different professor that taught this.
You might be remembering something I said. I say a lot of BS in those classes.
Oh.
No, I might have been relating more of a hypothetical. So I don't remember the exact instruction moment there, but yeah, I don't recall ever having a client that I had to do a modification like that. So it's probably more of a hypothetical. But yeah, I mean, you as an exercise professional, and this is why I think it's important for somebody who has limitations or lacks adequate knowledge in exercise to see a professional and get some guidance from them and get somebody who's going to be creative, because you have a lot of these fitness professionals that their only experience is their own training and their only capacity is to train like they train. They're not going to be helpful for you if your needs are much different than theirs. And so you want a trainer who's going to say, okay, we see you as an individual. This is what your needs are. These are what your limitations are. This is what your capabilities are. Let's give you the best possible program to improve across that spectrum of fitness and to improve your body composition. And so kind of back to this whole beginning of this conversation was, is it more or less cardio to burn fat? I think really the strongest conclusion there is less cardio from a standpoint of investing our time in doing cardio, do more as we're able, intensive cardio to stimulate the cardiovascular health, focus more on building muscle strength. And in hypertrophy, we're going to improve our lean muscle mass, which whether we lose fat or not, we are improving our body composition. And another plus to kind of focusing on the strength side of it, being in a more moderate caloric state, it may either eucaloric or slightly hypocaloric or even slightly hypercaloric, we're able to eat more to fuel that muscle hypertrophy and maintaining that muscle mass, to fuel the protein synthesis. We can enjoy food. We're not in this constant state of deprivation where it's like, I can't eat and I got to keep running more because my metabolism is slowing down and I'm losing muscle mass and I can't burn the fat that I need to burn. And we just keep doing more and more cardio, eating less and less, losing muscle mass, and it becomes that vicious cycle. Do as little cardio as you need to improve your heart health, and then be as active as possible at a lower intensity so that we're burning calories so that we don't have to decrease caloric intake, but we still kind of in that mild deficit and be able to lose fat.
Well, I like how you mentioned that we can still do that in a slightly hyper caloric intake. And a lot of people don't think that. They either say I have to take in my caloric intake to have it be at maintenance or below maintenance because I'm going to lose weight. But if you take it at just ever so slightly hyper, you are feeding your muscles and you're replenishing them and they're growing. And then your metabolism is spiking and you're burning through more throughout the day. And a lot of people, they don't grasp that because we're taught you lose weight with less calories taken in and more calories burnt.
I actually had a client a number of years ago who was really working out extremely hard. She was probably one of our best fitness clients in terms of putting the intensity in when she came in to work out. And not that she really needed to lose a lot of weight. I mean, she was in pretty good shape, but she was like, her weight loss had kind of plateaued and she couldn't figure out why she wasn't losing weight, and looked at her kind of dietary recall and it's like, well, if you're honest in what you're eating here, you should be losing weight, because that's not a lot of food and you're burning a lot of calories. And I said, I think what you really need to do, I think you need to eat more. She said, I'm trying to lose weight. Why do I have to eat more? I said, trust me, if you eat a little bit more, again, focusing kind of more on the protein side, maybe even a little bit more carbohydrates, you're going to begin to lose weight. And she did. She started eating more and she started losing weight because, again, the metabolism is putting that fuel into the physical activity rather than trying to conserve it, saying, oh, I'm in this state of starvation. I need to eat less. I need to slow my overall metabolism so I can conserve these calories in case food never comes again. You're giving your body a little bit more, saying, okay, I'm fueled for hypertrophy. I'm fueled for muscle activity. I'm going to burn fat because that is the energy that I don't need to be storing around. I need to have carbohydrate. I need to have, ATP in the muscle. And so we burn fat, we maintain our muscle mass, and we get leaner.
Yeah. I think that's really cool because I'm hoping that for someone who's starting their fitness journey or aging well, they don't focus so much on calorie in, calorie out, and they have a little bit of a cushion, right? And now it's not as intimidating and it's not as overwhelming. And so by doing so and knowing that you can have a little slightly above your maintenance level and as far as calorie intake, you can stay on track. It's a lot easier if you have that mindset.
Yeah, and I think the important thing with caloric balance is that is the most important part of losing weight. If we are in a hypocaloric state, we are going to lose body weight. But we don't always want to lose body weight. We want to lose body fat. And we might actually need to increase our calories a little bit to be able to fuel the physical activity, the higher intensity physical activity that we want to do. And ultimately, that does kind of trigger us to be in really a more hypercaloric state. And so hypocaloric, hypercaloric, or eucaloric is really a state of what your body is bringing in and what it's actually using, and whether your body weight is changing. And generally when we're looking at body weight changes, it doesn't have to be a whole scale change on the scale. That's really bad phrasing there, but it just needs to be that we're trying to decrease our fat mass and maintain or gain our muscle mass. And so you may actually be gaining weight because you're putting on more muscle mass relative to the amount of fat that you're losing. And so your weight goes up, but your body composition is improving. And so a little bit more calories is going to be necessary because you're boosting that overall resting metabolism. But you're probably still in a kind of a eucaloric state or hypocaloric state relative to your fat, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to tell people, if you eat a little bit more, you're going to lose fat when you're like 30% body fat. You're definitely in a hypercaloric state and need to decrease your calories, but we don't want to decrease them so much that it negatively affects our performance and our ability to perform physical activity and to exercise and to gain muscle. If that makes sense.
Totally. So I would say in conclusion, you don't have to be super, super strict on your diet. Be aware of your diet, take in as much healthy thing, but don't be so hyper focused on it that you lose track of your goals and you want to give up. The important part is to maintain consistency and stay not just in the middle of that continuous spectrum of weight training or cardio. Go all across the board. Get as much of that spectrum as possible. Be as active as possible. If you have limited mobility, find a professional that can help you move forward, or yourself can get as creative as possible. By doing these things, you will improve your health, improve your body composition, most importantly,
age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast, and until next time, keep aging well.